Hey people, I'm Suede. I get a lot of requests to talk about buildings. Now, in Civ 3, buildings generally aren't super overtuned. They have incremental effects that pay off over the course of several hundreds of turns. Many are pretty situational or should only be built in very select cities, but there is a certain tier of building in Civ 3. These are the buildings that you can benefit from building in all of your core cities, and I'd like to talk about them today. So, from least to most important, let's go. So number 6 is the harbor. Harbors are a must-have. Obviously, they're limited to coastal cities, so I can't put them too high on this list, but any coastal city with, let's say, access to 2 or more water tiles should have a harbor eventually. It might not be your top priority, but you benefit from it. Now, there's a bunch of small benefits it gives. It gives veteran naval units, it lets you heal your naval units faster, and it unlocks sea trade, which you probably want at least one harbor for that reason. But the biggest one is that it increases the food yields on water tiles. So let's talk about how water tiles work. Coast gives 1 food and 2 commerce. So you see that if we go to London here, it's actually 3 commerce because we're in Republic, and it gets +1 commerce. The same thing would happen if you're in a Golden Age. But yeah, the base commerce is 2. But normally you only get 1 food from the water tiles. You get 2 when you have the harbor, because the harbor gives +1 food on water tiles. And 2 is actually the same amount of food that a citizen eats each turn. So a harbor lets the city grow indefinitely and increase its commercial output as long as there are more water tiles for you to use. Now, I wouldn't prioritize these tiles over land tiles, since your basic worked plains or grassland tile gives 2 food and a shield. But for big cities and cities with bad land like tundra or desert, like you see here on this island, harbors are great for growing your cities and increasing your commercial output. So let's say the rule should be when you run out of 2 food tiles, like so grassland or irrigated plains, I'd recommend building a harbor as a top priority. Let's check out Warwick here. So you notice that I actually planted Warwick on top of an oasis. So planting on top of bonus food wastes that bonus food, but I did that here. I mean, 1, to get the whale, but secondly, so that I'd have access to all of these commercial tiles. So you notice that the production of the city is pretty garbage. It's just 4. But the commerce we're raking in is not insignificant because we have that harbor. Let's see what happens if we sell the harbor. So we have 4 surplus food at the moment. Now we are badly starving. So the population will probably go down by at least 3 citizens here. Maybe only 2 if we do this. But yeah, you can tell that like the harbor is what unlocks us to do that. And with a hospital, the city can grow even bigger. So a harbor is a big deal. Next on our list is the university. So by the time you get this far in the game, your cities should each produce dozens of commerce. I mean, by the end of the medieval era and the early industrial era. And so a 50% increase will net you a lot of gold per turn, and that's what the university does. It's a simple multiplier on the gold that you put into teching. So if you are teching, you benefit from this building. It's just the same as the library, but it's more expensive. So I can't put it too high on the list, but it is still absolutely fantastic for the reason that a library is absolutely fantastic. Now, unless you plan to have the game basically won before the mid-industrial era, all of your core cities should ideally have universities. So you can see that here, like look at London. So London gets 104 commerce per turn. The library gives +50%, the university gives +50%. So this is pretty simple. Sell the university, sell the library. Oops, not the market. Sell the library. Yeah, we're only getting 52. So it's just literally those 2 buildings combined will double your science output. Now, this is because we're spending 100% on the science slider. If we were spending more on the luxury slider, they wouldn't have quite a big effect, or if we were not spending on tech. But generally, you're probably going to be spending like 70 to 80% on tech. So it's a great idea to have libraries and universities. So number 4 on our list of essential buildings is the courthouse. So courthouses reduce corruption and waste, normally by about 8 to 12% or something like that. Less corruption means more commerce, and less waste means more shields. So you heard that right. This is one of the few buildings available before the end game that actually increases the shields that your city has access to, making it pretty damn strong. Courthouses are fairly expensive, especially in corrupt cities, but if a city has a decent sized population, I'd say 5 or more, and has worked tiles, as in you mined or roaded or irrigated near the city, it benefits from a courthouse. As long as it has a courthouse, which means as long as it has corruption, which means potentially any city except your capital, then it will benefit from having a courthouse. And to reiterate, do not build a courthouse in your capital. The extra gold and production you get is funneled through other multipliers like the library, market, and factory. This makes the courthouse an important priority in those like mid-tier cities, like the 8th to 20th cities that you build on a standard map, that are decently corrupt, but not so corrupt that you can't build buildings in them. But again, all cities benefit from a courthouse, except for your capital, in theory. It's just lower on the priority list in some cities. In super corrupt cities with mediocre land, for example, like, I don't know, even this one's okay because of you get a lot of commerce, like I said, from the coastal tiles. Look at this. It's benefiting from that courthouse. Like this one, or there's not really an example on this map. Anyway, but tundra cities, desert cities, you get the picture. On cities like that, it's lower on the priority list just because they don't have high yields. You'd be better off building more workers, for example, or never doing a courthouse at all. But it should be a staple building of the rest of your empire. So I'll show you what that effect looks like. Let's look at Hyangsan. So 43 shields per turn, 46 science per turn. We sell the courthouse. So we have 43 minus 5 right now, and now it's 41 minus 7. So because the base shields decreased, because more is being lost to waste, the factory and the hydro plant don't do as much anymore. So that's what I meant when I'm talking about the multipliers. These factories and hydro plants act as multipliers on the shields, and if you're losing shields to waste, you're also losing the bonus shields from the factory and the hydro plant. So if you have stuff like factory, hydro plant, or library, university, then it's extra important to have the courthouse because you're losing the multiplier shields too, or shields or commerce too. And yeah, well, you'll notice that we lost a lot of commerce too because we're not getting as much from the university and library, and because we lost base commerce. So next on our list is the aqueduct. Cities that aren't next to fresh water can't grow past size 6 without an aqueduct. So really, this should be number 1 on the list, but ideally you should place the cities next to fresh water so they don't need an aqueduct, and it's a little lower here because of that. But if your city has enough food to grow to size 7, and the game lets you build an aqueduct, you should probably build one. Your cities will stop growing at size 6 if you don't have an aqueduct. I can't stress enough how much high population is important to this game. So the entire reason that my commerce is so high is because I have the high population. The entire reason that these buildings, like the library and the universities and the factory hydro plants, scale so well and are worth building at all is because I have high population. Having high population is just so important for commerce and production in this game. If you're playing on Regent or higher and the AI is consistently out-teching or outproducing you, this is one of the potential reasons why. The AI is awful at building selections. They pretty much just toss buildings in a city whenever, but they are good at getting cities to grow. They irrigate a lot, they build the happiness buildings, and they build aqueducts and hospitals. So for that reason, aqueduct is very high on the priority list. And if you play Republic, which is 100% something that you should do, or if you play Monarchy, I guess, a little, aqueducts are important because they allow for more unit support. This benefit is the equivalent of 4 gold per turn per aqueduct in Republic and 2 gold per turn per aqueduct in Monarchy. That's aside from all the commerce and all the other benefits that the new citizens bring. Aqueducts are super important, and I'd recommend them building them in cities once they reach about 5 or 6 population. Some people build them when they're at like 2 or 3 population. The aqueduct doesn't do anything until you hit size 7, so don't build it until you're near size 7, like size 5 or 6. Otherwise, it's just sitting in the city, costing you maintenance. Okay, number 2. It's the library. We went over this before. The 50% bonus on science is great, and this thing is way cheaper than university. So that alone puts it on the essentials list. But the thing that puts it above and beyond is the culture. This building already belongs in every core city, and the culture means that you don't need any other cultural buildings. A library alone will get you the border expands and fend off the culture flips on all but the highest difficulty levels. As a result, you definitely need this as a staple part of your build. So look at this game. We're not having any issues with culture. We're border to border with everybody. We got all the border expands, but you're not going to see any temples or anything in these cities. We're just using libraries, and that's all we need to get all the culture we need. So before we get to number 1, I'd like to give an honorable mention to the Granary and the Barracks. These are fantastic buildings, but you should not be building them in every city. You should build them in a few select cities that benefit from them most, but in most cities, prioritize the buildings that I put on this list. So, without further ado, let's get to the marketplace. Marketplace is number 1. It's got to be the marketplace. These are just astounding value if you play around them. They give plus 50% treasury income, so any gold not spent on the science slider or the happiness slider gets that multiplier. So here we're not actually getting a multiplier at all. Here we get the complete multiplier. Here, 20% of our income, the income that's not going to science or the luxury slider, gets that multiplier. So it's not as big as the library, since generally you're not going to have as much on the treasury, money going into your treasury as you do into science. But the second effect is just really, really good. It gives bonus happy faces based on the numbers of luxuries you have. If you play around luxuries, you should be usually able to secure and trade for around 6 or 7 different luxuries. This means that the marketplace gives 6 or 9 happy faces, plus the base happy faces that luxuries give. The TLDR that your cities will never be unhappy until they are like size 14, unless you're dealing with extensive war weariness. So check out Moscow right now. Remember, we're 0% on the happiness slider. Look at how happy our cities are. You don't see any unhappy citizens. It's because we have the marketplace. Look at all these fucking happy faces. So many happy faces. It is just such a good effect. All you have to do is prioritize trading around luxuries, which is just something that you should be doing anyway. So as a result of all the happy faces that this brings in, you don't need to build any other happiness buildings. So no cathedrals, no Colosseums, no temples even. This saves you tons of gold per turn in maintenance costs. But it's not just the gold, it's the shield cost too. If you have 6 luxuries, a market gives 6 happy faces. Colosseum, Cathedral, and Temple combined also give 6 happy faces. The market costs 100 shields, and those buildings combined cost 360 shields. So by going for markets plus Lux, you save 260 shields per city. On a large map, you could easily have about 20 core cities maybe, so you could save 5,200 shields. That's the equivalent of 65 cavalry or 52 bombers. Do you know what wins you the game? Having 52 bombers. And markets are the reason that I can grow my cities and have so many shields at my disposal when I play. So I'd say this is a pretty damn essential building. I'd recommend building it in all your games. All right, that's everything, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I'll see you guys next time.